Welcome everybody. This is the session on SD-Access, the new SD-Access system by VMware. I'm John Turner, I'm head of customer marketing and enablement, and I'm here with Keith Bradley from Nature Fresh.
Hi, I'm Keith Bradley, VP of IT and Security for Nature Fresh Farms.
All right, cool. So we're going to go through the deck, and we've got some time for Q&A. Keith's going to I'll go through the solution a little bit, give you an idea sort of what the solution is, where it fits, and then Keith's going to actually talk about the deployment that he's actually done at Nature Fresh. So cool. Everybody having a good time?
Yeah.
Maybe you should all sit up closer. This is this thing where did
everybody eat lunch? Everybody had a good lunch?
Yeah, there you go. We got the after lunch.
Yeah, after lunch session. Nobody.
Yeah. Please don't fall asleep.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So usual disclaimer. I'm not going to read it. Blah blah blah. All right. So again, you probably have seen this slide. One of the things that, as we think about connectivity and multi-cloud, you hear multi-cloud all the time. And but it's not just necessarily multi-cloud. It's work from anywhere. It's the fact that you've got DevOps teams that are distributed throughout your organization. Folks are working from anywhere, and the challenge has always been as you have more and more services that are deployed in the cloud or deployed in various locations, whether they be on-prem, you've got to have some way to connect everything. And the solution typically with these distributed applications has been a remote access VPN. And the challenge, of course, is either you're dragging that remote access VPN back to your corporate locations. I know in VMware we have many VPNs that are deployed, and we do a best connectivity to them. But the challenge ends up being, especially as you have applications that are deployed in the cloud, do you really want to hairpin and strangle essentially all these connectivity? All this connectivity to your applications. So, basically we're thinking about there's a new way forward here, which is really distributed remote access. So how do you, instead of trying to create choke points that are either specific or geolocated to to the applications themselves, how do we just allow essentially users to work from anywhere, and not only the users to connect to those applications, but to connect best path to multiple applications. Today we see more and more customers deploying applications in multiple cloud locations, in data centers, in remote branch offices, or even as you think about it, if you've ever done any DevOps work, you actually might have a staging environment that lives on somebody's laptop. And again, that laptop might in the past have lived at corporate, and you could go and connect to staging 12, which was Scott's laptop in Palo Alto. But now Scott works from home. So do we give Scott his house? How do we make this work? And so the way we think about this now is really distributed remote access. So this is introducing VMware SD-Access. So this is a lightweight client that fits sort of between the secure access client and the VMware SD-WAN edge. So if you have VMware SD-WAN, obviously we've got hardware and software deployments. This is a mature multi-path, multiple. Oh geez, of course I'm going to get a phone call. Dynamic multi-path optimization. This is top of the line SD-WAN connectivity, which is great for branch distributed offices, even deploying SD-WAN edges in the cloud. Secure Access Client is a full ZTNA type client, but a lot of our customers wanted something somewhere in the middle, a little bit more lightweight, and that's where VMware SD-WAN Access. This really focuses on network path optimization as opposed to our SD-WAN Edge, which is dynamic multipath. So dynamic multipath, you have two connectivity, option to have two WAN interfaces into a box, be able to send out to the best path. This actually uses a single connectivity, single WAN connectivity, and then actually finds the best path for all applications that you're using. So some of the components, because this is, I will tell you this, one of the other alternative titles for this was VMware SD-Access Client. By the way, if I say SD-WAN Client, we renamed it, so I may mess up, but deployed in 5 minutes, being able to go and literally set up from scratch connectivity, secure connectivity between two devices with no hardware, no additional hardware, no cloud in 5 minutes. And we timed it, and you literally can do it in 5 minutes. So the components of this are pretty simple. It's all software, SD-Access client. This thing runs on a PC, Macs, Linux, iOS, and Android, so it's actually in the App Store on Apple. It shows up as a VPN connector, so that's how in iOS, because iOS is very locked down. It does SSO SAML authentication, so you can integrate directly into your authentication, and you'll see how the connectivity works on this, and it's very lightweight. The SD-Access client connector, so this is what essentially sits out at the resource side. So if you have resources that you want to get your users access to, the SD-Access client connector is what sits there. This is also just recently we enabled the SD-Access client connector to be able to act as a VPN concentrator as well. So I'll go through the architecture a little bit. Headless client. So this is really the SD-Access client in headless mode, and that allows you to basically deploy this on any type of any one of the operating systems, literally in a headless mode. So this could be great for IoT. We have folks that are looking at this for medical imaging devices, and they want to be able to do remote diagnostics into those devices. The headless client essentially just replaces that the user login. The SD-Access orchestrator, so this is essentially where everything is configured. It plays only the role of orchestration. It's not in the path, and it's not something that gets deployed. You don't need to deploy this. This is just our portal for it. And then the SD-Access relay, and I'll show you these. The SD-Access relay is actually just something that helps discover essentially the path between the clients and the resources that they want. There is zero configuration in the SD-Access relay. These literally just sit there and help navigate situations where there is no direct access to that client. So if it's behind a firewall or on a home router, it'll use the SD-Access relay to find the other side of the connectivity. So really, a couple things that are interesting about this. This is on demand. So the tunnels it brings up are only used essentially on demand. So you can look at the connectivity list, and if you haven't actually tried to use the resource, there's nothing there. As soon as you try to access the resource, it brings that up. You can turn them on if you want them, but it will establish the tunnel as needed. As I said before, so there's direct and relayed communication, so basically you don't really need to have a direct path. This will figure out whether it has direct path, and in fact it will change the pathing based off of the optimization. So it's going to find the most optimal route, whether that's direct or indirect, and it will make that connection. Literally no backhaul, and then this multipath. So because it's performance-based path selection, really again, you might have multiple resources that you're accessing in the cloud. Each of those resources could take a different path depending on the most optimal route. Again, if you're thinking about deploying something in maybe on-prem, like Azure, GCP, and AWS, each of those might have 4 separate paths, and those tunnels would be established to the client differently, on their best, whatever best route there is, optimal path. All right. As far as deployment, it's pretty simple for the segmented private access. Essentially, we create a number of user policy roles. Users get stuck in groups, and then policies get defined by members of the group. So you have your source and destination, or in the case of a mesh, you can have full connectivity to everything, or point-to-point, which would be defining the source and then the endpoint of where it's going to go. So in this particular case, you might have a user network. Bob can live within that. Bob has a senior developer network. He's got access to the production, development, and Joe's staging environment. And Joe, who's just a junior developer, has production view only, can't deploy, but can deploy to dev, and he has access to Bob's network. And Bob's resources staging is in fact actually on his client laptop itself. So we have really flexible ways to deploy these, and of course everything gets inherited. So if Bob is a member of multiple groups, Bob will get access to the app, the internal app, plus his network and whatever else he's granted. This is all done through creation. We call them networks within the group itself, within the portal itself. And it's a few clicks to creation. Now, I'm sure not everybody wants to go and deploy these via clicks. These are also deployable via API. So all of this can be defined by API and dynamically built. So what is the actual flow of traffic? So in this particular case, we've got users. Do I have a? Oh, I do. I've got remote workers that have both a client. These can have direct path between them in a mesh, and then access out through the cloud to either the public cloud or a data center to the resources. They can actually install the gate with a client connector, or they could be installed directly on the workload itself. So the workload could have that SD-Access client on it, and then you would have direct access to that workload itself. Make sense? Gotta go the other way. So when there's direct path, they'll find it. If there's not direct path, then we have the optimization relays, and they'll use the optimization relays. A better example of this, just so we sort of look through this. If there's direct path, it's obviously just going to find it right out to the resources. If it's not direct path, then we can go through the optimization relays. And again, this is where each of these resources on the right-hand side essentially can have their own path that they take to the clients wherever that path is. Again, we can have direct access, or in the other case, we can actually do access from compute to compute as well. All right, so, and by the way, so this is all done through an overlay access policy. The policy is pushed down to the clients themselves, so every client will subscribe to the policy and take the policy action. But all the enforcement essentially is done at the resources and the client side of things. So there's really nothing that's in the way. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Keith, and Keith, show us what you did with it.
Well, thank you. So I'll start off talking a little bit about what NatureFresh Farms do. What do? We are a 250-acre greenhouse, total IOT, and we grow bell peppers, tomatoes, cucumbers, and strawberries. Actually, we just planted almost 100 acres of strawberries in the last month. Something new that we're just getting into. Hopefully it's going to be a big hit for us, especially organics. So it was something new that we did. 250 acres of land. We cover not only Canada, US, and Mexico. We have facilities there. We have distribution centers also across North America. Each of the blue dots represents where we're kind of at our major hubs. I like to call each of our sites their own private cloud, how they're doing things and what they do. And they each collect stuff, and we use AI to both optimize our growth and to collect our data and to make sure that we're doing more and more each day. So every time we do it. So I did the math, and I did make a typo on that slide. Ooh, that's okay. I'll make do with that. So data for us is major. We've actually now, with the extra 50 acres that we just grew, we have about 2.3 million plants growing at one time. And they generate about 1.8 gigs of data per week, not 18 gigs. But I don't know with the strawberries, because the strawberries, truthfully, have already thrown me way off because I'll double the data that I've seen there. We take everything from pictures to the health of the plant, everything like that. If you can imagine it, we take that value. We actually, and funny, I just laughed, I didn't even know it existed, that we actually are now recording the sunlight that reflects off of our greenhouse and then off of the clouds that come down. It's a different sensor because the light affects the plants differently. It was like, what sensor are you guys putting in here? So if you think of it, we do all kinds of crazy stuff like that, which just makes it fun. So I'll go back to where we were. So if I go back probably about five years ago now, we had 3 plants. They were up and going. We didn't have Mexico yet. We were just kind of there. But we did all the work individually at each plant. Even though plant 1 and plant 2 were in Canada, 5-minute drive apart, they were very segmented. We're very siloed off, and we never communicated. So we learned that our growers were doing different things to different sites, and they didn't share, they didn't communicate, didn't want to do anything well together. So once we did that, we thought, well, hey, what's the first thing you think about doing trying to connect stuff? Well, we started with a hardware VPN. Worked, slow, little not quite there, and then this great thing that came on board was the SD-WAN. And it was actually a funny story, and John talks about it, how quick we can get it out. The best look from VMware was we actually did a proof of concept. I don't know if I told you this or not. We did a proof of concept with VMware, and we said we're going to try this SD-WAN solution, see if it works or not. Got the hardware in on a Thursday. My president called me up and basically said to me, I said I was going to move into this new sales office in Central 33 in a month? I'm moving in on Monday, and I need everything to work. So Friday, we'd had a pre-scheduled meeting to make this SD-WAN solution work in a test environment. I got on the phone call with the guy and I said, well, here's the new thing. I got internet here, we're gonna make this work today. And he's like, you're making this live today? I'm like, yep, we got 3 hours. And yep, by about noon, we actually did have it up. But it was kind of one of the great steps that we did here, where all of a sudden this remote office that was out in the middle of nowhere could now start to get into our solution. And we could optimize it because we ran into bandwidth issues. We could start to optimize, choose which system needed access quicker than somebody else. So we kept going through that. Oh, wrong button. Then once I realized what we did is I started to say, okay, let's start consolidating things. Let's start getting rid of these silos and start sharing the data. So we consolidated the 2 data centers in plant 1 and 2 through the solution and kind of made them all as one. So now we kind of made our data center more complete and kind of helped us centralize things. And when we did that, we actually started to centralize the growth that we were doing too. Now all of a sudden the growers started to communicate because it's all in one spot. Instead of him having to log out of one, look at the next one, it was all there. And so all this data came into one place. Then the next thing we did, which if you're in the IT world and you've dealt with being out in the middle of nowhere, and I've did it forever, is we actually added a secondary path. So now we have 2 ways in. So we have our fiber optics and we had a 5G network that's feeding us. So for the first time ever, we had redundancy with everything. And it was, truthfully, it was something that was massively great. And this is about the 2019 range. Then we did the final step where we actually merged Ohio into our data center, still letting them have a data center of their own, but much smaller, but basically works in conjunction with 2. And this is all through the SD-WAN solution that we implemented to make things all communicate. Then we added, of course, our Mexico plant, our distribution centers. But this is the joy, is once we built this foundation, once we got it going, it was minutes now. When I added Mexico, when I had DC2, DC3, it was literally just sending them a device, connect to your laptop, there you go, you're connected. So then last year, we also, then for us, something we weren't prepared for is COVID hit and everybody started to work from home. So we started to expand this for work from home, and it actually worked really well for us, especially people in the community, especially people that didn't have multipath. Because now we could put a 5G option in this device, they could use their internet that was basically terrible, and they could actually function. So it really worked out great for us to get everything into one data center. Oh, what do we got next here? So we gained. So now we consolidate everything, and we basically kind of created, I like to say, our own private cloud on-prem. So we basically have it, it's secured, we know we can access it, we know who can access it and from where, and we have backup to it, and we've just expanded that. We expanded in Mexico, we expanded all these places, again, instantaneously without it. And the nice thing that was a nice reduction is now that we had less servers all over the place, we were able to do this in one data center. So I didn't have to run from phase to phase and area to area to continue to do this. And it just kind of was one of those things where you didn't realize how much craziness you were facing each day. Then the SD-Access client came into the thing. And I think that was Barcelona last year that we announced it. And like everybody that heard it in the group, I said, I want it, I need it, I have to have it. I just need to have this because I think this is going to change what we did. So before this is kind of what we had, is we had the typical firewall, traditional VPN coming into the farm. And it worked. It never worked great. It always felt like it was a fight every day to do it. And it kind of did that. So now with the SD-Access client, we're able to find a secure way for them to come into our facility. And it kind of helped us find an easier way for them to do this, for our work from home people and our growers. Because our growers basically, when they take their laptop off the farm and they go home, they're still watching it. I can actually tease because it's funny, I know I can talk to the growers and they're always there on a Sunday. They're always there, but they like it because they said, I finally can go home at 5, turn my laptop at home and work and do everything I can from home, which we were never able to do before we started to see these SD-WAN clients. The VPN was a little slow, sluggish, we fought with it. But with everything that we could do there, we could start to do it. And now we can start to do it. And the great thing for my team was, my IT team, was basically somebody calls them up and says, hey, I need to work from home today. All right, we remote into their laptop, install a client, give them what they need, poof, done. Through the profiles, they're in and out. It now became a very easy, quick solution. It wasn't drawn out. Some of the edges that had 5G built into it, we have different ones that have 5G on them now, and they access it from everywhere. Which, if you heard the announcement, and I'm assuming we can talk about the 5G, you know, that's the 5G concept is very exciting for us because we're looking at adding 5G to our laptops and now using the SD-WAN. Which version is that one now? Because
So that's going to be, yeah, that's in the 6.0 or 6.x side, yeah?
Yeah, yep. that allow basically this laptop through a private 5G network. I'm excited about it. I know John knows that's all I've been thinking about the other night, as through a 5G network. And one of the, that allows us to basically have a laptop that can access a private 5G network and access what we need to let them do, which to me will change everything, because if you've dealt with Wi-Fi, it's terrible. It's terrible in a greenhouse. The plants interfere with everything. The humidity's terrible. It's just no fun at all. So 5G seems to be consistent. So like I said, we built this, we did all this, and then I ripped out the VPN. Not one person on my IT team was sad the day I turned that firewall rule off and said it's done. They were all very happy about it. But the other thing I liked, and going to the security portion, is now we had one less firewall rule, one less way for people to get into our system and see what's going on. And that was, at the end of the day, that's my goal, is basically everything's blocked. It only comes in through a secure channel, and that's just the way it's going to be. Then we go from there. So this is where we kind of started to go. So the thing that we did too that's different is we started to do some different things with the SD-WAN client that 5 to 10 years ago, our VPN wouldn't let us do, routing wouldn't really let us do, and it was very complicated for us to do because we have multiple networks, and we don't VLAN off in the typical way. A lot of our vendors, they want their own private network, totally segregated. They don't want, it can't be VLAN, it can't be stuff like that. So for the first time ever, we were able to actually allow some of our 5G harvesting robots to actually get into our Priva network, or our growing network that we call it. So it was something very new for us to do. So we're able to get into our AI platform, directly into it now, much quicker, much cleaner, and a much more robust way of doing things. So it just continued to clean it up. We could define what these harvesting computers could do too. So we could actually say, hey, we've invented this, we built this, it only needs access to X, Y, and Z. It only needs access to an S3 bucket that's internal, but it only can write to it. It can't read from it even sometimes. We've done weird things like that. And it really allowed us to expand our dynamics of what we did, because we could do so much more and allowed to give them access. And then we started creating robots everywhere. We have stuff everywhere in our greenhouse that are doing things, and they've got 5G on it, and that's why private 5G, very excited. I'm gonna keep telling you that until I have it. So it's just what we did, and it just kind of did something new and unique. And it made things simplicity. Even this morning, I didn't even tell you that. This morning, we're just turning on our Strawberry facility in Ohio. And we're getting the packing lines ready. And we had a guy from Holland there, and he couldn't do the things he needed to do because they have their own segregated network on this packing line. And My IT person that does all my SD-WAN now, she basically sat down and said, I'm going to rebuild this, and she ended up using a connector and the orchestra and gave them access to that network in a secured way from Holland to there by just adding a laptop. Basically what she did is she had one of my maintenance guys basically boot up a laptop, put it on there, and now they can see it. So for the first time, it wasn't a huge hassle, and now the guy can actually access it whenever he wants, but we can control what's going on. So it was something that was fun this morning that started at about 3 o'clock this morning, I think, because fun thing with plants, they grow at their own rate, and when they come bigger, they pick earlier. So now everybody's scared that we're going to start picking too early, so all those dates are off. But again, that's where this did. Now, the one thing too that we always struggle with, and the one thing that our growers walk around, and every person here walks around to, is a cell phone. They love it. They want to be able to get access to our information. But how did I do it? So we put the SD-WAN client on the phone, and then that allowed us to get them access to all the applications they had at the farm, which was one more way, which is funny now because it's like walking here and seeing people here, you think they're going to run into something because everybody's on their phone here now. I tease our growers because they're literally going down the rows like this, and I'm like, you're going to run into something because they're more wanting to see the data that they're collecting, and now they can do it from their phone, which is new to them, which is a great thing for them. They couldn't do it. Because going back in time, and I always think this is a funny story because this is coming from our owner when he first started getting the greenhouses. And we're a very big Mennonite community, a lot of churchgoers. It was very common on a Sunday morning to be in church, and the clouds would come in, and about 10 guys would all stand up and leave. Because they all had to go to make changes to their greenhouse. They had to close their vents or do something like that. Now, they just hop on their phone right in church, which I know they probably shouldn't be doing, but they can make that change and that adjustment right there. So it really enabled them to do more fun things. So like I said, with the connector there, we were able to get in, and then we could actually start to see our growing network, which from their phone was something we had never done, never thought of doing. I didn't even think it would ever be really possible without the SD-WAN, especially from the phone. I always thought if I gave it enough brain power, I'd probably be able to do it from the iPad, from the computer, because it's just a matter of routing and all this, that, and the other thing, but I always said, how much work do I put into it? But now we can roll out things like this, like I said this morning, within minutes, within hours. We can change how we do it, and it's a great feature set that we've added to us. And as a pun of what we do, it allowed us to grow our network as we grew, and it just continued to happen. So then we have this great thing that's happening here now where we have our hardware SD-WAN solution, our SD-WAN client. It just kind of all connects, it all does it, and it's all going to become a single pane of glass in the long term that we can see everything. And that's what I like. I like simplicity as myself. I like to know and see what's going on. I don't want to have to go to 10 places to figure it out. I like that simplicity of it's here and that's what's going on. So we got rid of all the firewalls, and we had a new way for the secure vendors to do it. And then the other thing too, that is great, that is coming in and getting improvements in the future that we always know everything does improve, is the logs. We're able now to see more of what vendors are doing, what they're accessing, because we do a lot of trials for vendors. We basically say to them, oh, you want to bring this robot in here to pick strawberries for us? Yeah, we'll give you an S3 bucket internally. We'll install the software on your computer so you can get to our resources that we want to let you do, but now we can monitor it and see what's going on. And that's where the neat part too is we optimize. With the multipath optimization and even the optimization within the clients, we're able to optimize the AI, because anything over 60 milliseconds of delay actually causes us a network error. The growing IoT system doesn't like anything over that. And once it hits 80, it basically almost turns off at 60 seconds, because it's weird, and until you really get into it, the data doesn't hit the right spot at the right time, and it doesn't know how to collect it. So it's something just weird out there and weird for what we do. So I know it's a lot. We do a lot of things out there. Do we have any questions for John or myself here now? Even just want to talk about greenhouse. I'm always good at that.
I'll start off. Hey, Keith. So one of the things I think was interesting in this is, as we thought about this and deploying it, you talk a lot about removing firewall rules and things like that. But obviously, we're not reducing security. What were some of the complexities in deploying a firewall versus deploying the SD-Access client?
With the SD-WAN access client, it basically just started to work. There was no real port forwards. You didn't have to play with any of that. It's secure to remote because you have the client within your network and the SD-WAN client that comes in, does a shared connection, just goes through the firewall because it reaches out as needed. When we're dealing with the firewall rules, it gets really tricky because we do a lot of firewall manipulation because we will have multi-vendors, multi-people trying to access it. Well, of course, everybody wants access to port 8080. Everyone wants access to this. How do you convince them to change what they do? And then when it doesn't work right. So we were basically able to, over the last 6 months, last 3 months now, get rid of all those firewall rules and all that complexity to our network. So it's not that it made it more secure, but also made it more simplified. And now, when you look at it, it's not this long list of, okay, this is port forwarding to here, this is doing that, because I hate documentation and networking and stuff like that because it always drives me nuts. I want it there. I really want it. I hate doing it myself. So it just eliminated that and made that list a lot smaller.
So in this case, all of your groups and access and network and things like that are now just defined in the SD-Access portal. Yep. And as you need to define a new role for a vendor, you just put it there. You're not making modifications to your network infrastructure on site.
Yep, no, we don't. Right now, we've actually really got locked down. Before, because we had a small team, we had a lot of access to the router, to the firewall. Because we're a small team, we had to be agile enough, we had to let it in there. Now we're able to block that out and only give it to the SD-WAN client. So I know we're not going to ever have a major outage, and it's a lot easier for them because I always tell my team, my junior team, that when they do attempt things, don't use the main profile, make a copy of it, and then do that and see what happens with it, because it's easy to change the profile back if it is that, and that way it works. But yeah, profiles have dictated everything we do now. It makes life so much easier just to do it, because now I just go plop, there you go, this is what you need, because most vendors come in with the same requests. I want an S3 bucket, because we do that on site, and I need access to your AI machine. Which one is the biggest variable, but we got different ones for what they want to do.
Cool. Yeah. Questions? Come on up to the mic, because this is all recorded, so that way we can hear your question.
Any challenges in getting clients onto the devices, like robots, for example?
Yeah, it was a challenge, but for the most part, most of the things that we did already had a computer out there. The computer was there, and we usually would just either add a hardware 5G option to do it, or just if the 5G was built in the laptop. Most of the vendors that work in our space have 5G built onto it. So it's just a matter of adding our client to it, and there you go, and that kind of, like I said, you just accepted the profile and bang, you go.
But generally speaking, but not issues with like OS and compatibility?
No. Yeah, no, there was enough lists that we haven't ran into it yet, where we haven't seen a vendor say no to it. Most times they want access. So it's kind of that easier thing. They want to have that access, so they're a little more lenient. One vendor was they wanted to do a security profile of it. They wanted to see this, that, and the other. So I provided that to them. But again, that's where it's a tried, more proven solution that's out there. So they were okay, this isn't, I didn't go download AGX from the internet and hey, this is going to do what you want to do. But it did clean it up very nicely. We haven't ran into one I haven't did yet. We're even doing some of our water pumps and stuff like that. We're looking at doing everything like that now, like right down to the hardware level.
Because things like pumps, you have a controller that's there.
Yeah, so we're looking at doing that now this fall here now, because we got to rebuild. To give you an idea, we have, I didn't know how many we had. I thought we had like 30 or 40. I didn't realize we have 126 pumps in just Canada. And I was like, holy cow, where did this come from? But that's the thing, we want to be able to collect the data from them, but because they're remote and they're out in this building in the middle of nowhere, I either run fiber to them, but that's why 5G is coming in, and it's going to be a great thing for us just to connect that to it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so your robots, are they running mostly Windows, Linux? What's the...
Mostly Windows. Surprisingly, that seems to be what? We have 2 on Linux, but mostly Windows is doing it, and a lot of them just want access to things, and it's more just transferring the data.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Other questions? As you think about growing this out more and more, embedded temperature sensors, things like that, is that some more where you're thinking about even further out deploying?
Oh yeah, temperature sensors, things like that. We're looking at again. We did it a couple years ago where we actually, it didn't work well, but at the time, and now I think we have the technology through the SD-WAN, and that's why it's a great example. Is we didn't know this when we built in Ohio. We actually put a sensor on the string that holds the tomato vine up. And what it did is it weighed in real time the weight of the tomato. And we learned that the plants wanted to take a nap after so long. Like they couldn't grow 24/7. We just blasted them with light and said grow. We didn't realize that they needed that. So this weighed it, and what it would wait for, the computer would wait to see where the plant wouldn't absorb anymore. It didn't grow in weight. Even though we irrigated it, it didn't grow in weight. It worked, but we didn't have the connectivity to accept it. Because you gotta think we have about, we're gonna have about 200, 300,000 tomato plants out there. I think we had 500, 600 of these sensors out in a small section. We couldn't get the data there. But I think that's where the private 5G and the stuff like that will now allow us to collect that data again, because we still struggle with when the plant wants to sleep and be awake. And another quirky fact of what you do and why the latency is such a key thing for us too, if we miss irrigating the plant by about 5 to 8 minutes within its optimal time, it actually equates to a reduction in performance. Like, it's like you like to have your coffee in the morning at say 7 o'clock. If you have it at 8, it kind of can throw your whole day off. The planet is the exact same way. If you don't water it at this time, this time, and this time, and that time changes every day, and that's what we really grow at doing, it throws it off.
I just put my tomato plants in the ground, and they either grow or not, but
yeah.
Cool, awesome. Any other questions for us up here? All right. If you want to reach out to us, find us afterwards, follow us on LinkedIn. We're around for that. We'll stick around after if you guys want to come up and ask a question you felt too embarrassed to ask in person. And then lastly, please take the survey. I know I'm going to plug this and all these things. Take the survey. It really helps the Explore team understand sort of what kind of sessions you like, what kind of sessions you don't like, and then opportunity to give us some feedback. Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.